It's a delight to have our speaker here tonight. The first time I met with him, my mouth just dropped because the wealth of information and the knowledge he has about what we commonly call Obamacare is just incredible. And his insight is so basic and so profound that I thought, we really ought to have him come and speak. He was recommended by one of our clients, Bill Funstrom, who is also a CPA, and some of you have used his services for your tax returns. Excellent CPA, and we appreciate that. The reason why I mention that is we are always looking for good speakers, and so if you ever hear of good speakers, please recommend and tell us who they are. We usually shy against having your son or your daughter come and speak for us. That's usually a conflict of interest. And we have had a couple of those recommendations. So we evaluate the topic that they share and the qualifications that they have, and then we decide whether we would like them to come. And so we're excited to have Bill Hammett here. He's here with his wife and his parents, and we are glad to have them. We're glad to welcome them to tonight's presentation. First of all, I didn't realize that this certification existed, but Bill is actually a certified healthcare reform specialist. You talk about a specialty. That's very interesting. For a living, he's president of Hammett Health Incorporated, and what they do is they go into businesses, large and small, and they assist them in helping to organize their firm so that they can qualify and not get into trouble with the new Healthcare Reform Act. The other thing that's very interesting about him is because of his qualifications and credentials, he has actually made several visits to Washington, D.C. to report on and discuss the mechanics of how this thing will work and how it's going to be implemented, the long-term effects on it. He's also been invited to Sacramento and speak before those gentlemen and ladies. And so now we've asked him to come and speak before us and put a little sense into this whole process so that we can kind of understand what the ramifications are to us and what it actually means. And so now I will turn the time over to Bill and ask you to give him a warm welcome.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming out to listen to such a wonderful and sexy, I always refer to this as a sexy business here, the healthcare world. The Certified Healthcare Reform Specialist is one of the more sexy designations. I'm sure you'll all agree. But I am really actually very passionate about healthcare reform. I'm reading a book that asks what makes your heart sing, and it's such an interesting thing to say that healthcare reform or healthcare or insurance would make somebody's heart sing. But the way I would describe it is this is a business in which we help people protect themselves against the most unpredictable and generally most expensive risks they could ever face. And so with that in mind, I think it's very fascinating. The Affordable Care Act, the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, healthcare reform, all the same thing, is right in line with that. And in studying it a lot, I've learned that it's not nearly as good nor as bad as many people might have told you or you've learned. So I wrote this presentation specifically for you guys. Whether you get your news from the left or you get it from the right, whether it's Bill O'Reilly and Rush Limbaugh or Michael Moore and Ed Schultz or Rachel Maddow or Megyn Kelly or Sean Hannity, you're getting it wrong. You're getting a part of the story, but not the whole story. The messages are being delivered by the talking heads on TV and the people that we all watch and elect. A story I'll share as we get started is one of these trips to Washington, D.C., I was sitting with an elected official, a congressman, who will remain nameless. This is not a very complimentary story. And as we're sitting in there in this big, beautiful building in the Longfellow building up on Capitol Hill, sitting in the big plush leather chairs, it's very much right out of a Hollywood movie with all the buttons. I don't know what the buttons do there, but it's those leather chairs with the buttons in them, you know. All the staffers running around, while over his shoulder I see a window that's bulletproof so that people can't shoot through and get our congressman. All the windows in those buildings are bulletproof, probably for good reason at times. And we're talking about the ramifications of the Affordable Care Act. We're talking about the legislation that he has signed on to endorse. We're talking about what it means to all of us, all of you guys, on what's happening. The bells are ringing. There's a vote coming before he runs out and goes down his little private elevator and scoots off to make another vote on something he probably doesn't know much about. He stops me in the middle of the legislation he's signed on to and says, wait, hold on. What's an HMO? And I kind of was like, oh, here I am talking specifically about legislation and pages of documents that talk very specifically about 1/6 of the American economy, and he doesn't know some of the most basic of terms. Now, not everybody in this room knows what an HMO is. That's not your fault. You are not passing legislation to change 1/6 of the economy, okay? But that is a point that helps us understand that this is being done by people that have a different interest than our interest, okay? And the talking heads on TV are a little different than what we have in mind and what's best for us in our life, okay? So we're gonna talk briefly about the history of healthcare reform. We are going to talk about the long road from proposal to passage, what it is, like it or not, it's here, what the truth are behind the biggest issues and what we can all do about it, okay? So healthcare in our country has been in crisis for a long time, okay? It is a system that is breaking, which is different than broken. 85% of our country has been insured, and most of which happily insured for a very long time. As the country grows, that number of uninsured grows, but the 85% that have been insured and are happy with it. So that's why it's not a broken system as much as it's a breaking system. I heard a lot of talk about premiums and how much they cost. Yes, it's getting expensive and it's getting very costly, so that is why it's breaking. But the crisis has been there. The hospitals are getting squeezed by Medicare. The uninsured population, there's a lot of them that want coverage that couldn't ever get it. They got their checkbook out, they're ready to write a check, but nobody will take it because they are not healthy enough to get insurance. And then, of course, the insured population is underinsured, or they're paying too much. They're paying a car payment or a house payment on their policies. So instead of pretending that Obamacare started with our current president, it's important to kind of rewind way back to Harry Truman. Harry Truman is widely considered kind of the grandfather of healthcare reform. He was the one that really pushed to get a major healthcare system overhaul in place. He wanted a single-payer, government-run system. Back then, the same tenor from the opposite party was heard. This is socialist. We can't let this happen. And so what we found was Harry Truman got a piece of legislation passed that really modernized the healthcare system in the hospitals. Another fun fact of Harry S. Truman is the S's doesn't stand for anything. He has no middle name. He always did Harry S. with no dot because he doesn't have a middle name. He ended up putting the dot in there because his handlers, once he became president, said it was a bad example for America to have a middle name without the dot next to it, and because it made people think he didn't need that. So that's why he put the dot there. Fun fact. I'll have a good one for every one of these guys. Dwight Eisenhower, he was the one that kind of expanded medicine for military families. Eisenhower had a grandson named David. This is where Camp David, where a lot of the presidents retreat to, Camp David comes from. David married Nixon's granddaughter. How about that? Eisenhower is also the one that put under God in the Pledge of Allegiance. JFK, his fun fact is even better. He bought 1,200 Cuban cigars the day before he said no more importing anything from Cuba. Priorities. He supported a bill that would become what we know as Medicare right now, but nothing ever got passed. Obviously, his presidency came to an end, as we all know, very tragically. LBJ had a very eventful couple of years in the White House. 1964, he passes the Civil Rights Act, very big legislation. 1965, he passes Medicare. So very, very, very busy, very busy. LBJ once had a self-portrait painted, and he rejected it, saying it was the ugliest thing he ever saw. Fact. Since LBJ created it and Mr. Truman was the grandfather of Medicare, guess who got the first two Medicare cards? Harry and Bess Truman. There it is. There's the cards right there. For all you identity thieves, there's their Social Security numbers. Not going to work, though. Nixon, he proposed a lot of pieces of legislation. He also lost a bid to win high school presidency of his student body. So he won the president of America, but not of his high school. Go figure. He passed the Health Maintenance Organization Act. So what we all know as HMOs now today was Nixon's dealing. Ted Kennedy, who is the godfather of healthcare reform. Of course, the Kennedy family name is as close to the mafia as you're going to get in politics, so the godfather fits, okay? So Ted Kennedy introduces a single payer, doesn't actually happen. Gerald Ford comes in as the only president in American history to not ever be elected as the president or vice president, but serve as president. He comes in and his name wasn't actually Gerald Ford, it was Leslie Lynch King Jr., but his dad, Leslie Lynch King Sr., was a terrible alcoholic, and he changed his name to his stepfather's name, Gerald Ford. He develops some legislation that helps kind of reduce unnecessary spending, but not a lot happens with Gerald Ford. Jimmy Carter campaigned on reforming the healthcare reform system, takes over in a major recession, very bad economic times, tries to do a whole bunch of things, actually gets very close. You'll see a lot of interviews, not today, but you'll see a lot of interviews where Jimmy Carter will say they had healthcare reform passed. It was gonna happen, and ironically, Ted Kennedy he was the chair of one of the committees where the bill was going to be voted out to get to the floor of Congress to be passed, and Ted Kennedy, eyeing a presidential run in 1980, didn't let it happen, didn't let it get out of his committee. So Ted Kennedy, the godfather, didn't let Jimmy Carter's legislation pass or get out of committee. Ronald Reagan, you're not going to get a lot from Ronald Reagan, a president who said government is not the solution to the problem, government is the problem. You're not going to see massive spending bills come from President Reagan. He did pass a Medicare Act that helped expand a lot of care, expand a lot of benefits for Medicare eligible people. But that was about it. Not a lot going on there. He tore down a wall somewhere. He did a whole bunch of things, but not a lot with healthcare reform. George H.W. Bush, his fun fact, of course, was, he's for his 75th, 80th, and 85th birthday, you know what he did? Jumped out of an airplane. That's a fun fact. The other fun fact is me and H.W. got something in common, is the socks. You gotta love some good socks. You guys all see those out there? You gotta love a good pair of socks. The socks are like a male bra, it's like it's part of the outfit, but it's not really. Okay, I'm digressing here. So H.W. takes over what is now a disastrous bill that Ronald Reagan passed, and in 17 months they repeal it. Okay, remaining part of the healthcare agenda kind of is thwarted. There's a little bit on fraud and abuse, but George H.W. Bush doesn't get much done. And then we get Clinton. Clinton, of course, Bill Clinton, has his wife, First Lady Hillary Clinton, still in the news. She pushes Hillary Care. Hillary Care is a major expansion of our process. Big mandates of employers to cover big portions of healthcare for their employees. All right. Ultimately, it doesn't get passed. But they do pass a couple other things that are still staples. The HIPAA Act, which is portability, which ultimately led to COBRA. A lot of us are familiar with COBRA. It's the privacy rules that we still see now. S-CHIP, our state CHIP, is the Children's Health Insurance Plan, so still some more pieces there. Fun fact about Bill Clinton, two things. Number one, did you know he eats an apple? Everything all the way through, core and seeds and everything? I thought that was interesting. I don't know, going down, that's one thing. The way out, I don't know. The other thing is, in his introduction of healthcare reform, Hillary Care, to Congress, his teleprompters went out, and he totally ad-libbed that initial speech to Congress when he introduced healthcare to the floor of the House of Representatives. So I thought that was very interesting. And we got W. W's first term had another big tragedy, so there was not a lot that he got done. He did get Part D, Medicare Part D, which we all still are benefiting from today. So the prescription drugs for seniors is a part that is currently in place. W was a high school cheerleader. Did you know that? The other thing is the transition from the Clinton White House to the W White House was not really very fun. And the Clinton people removed all the W's from the keyboards in the White House. Kind of childish. You think these are grown men, leaders of our country, and they're taking W's off keyboards. And then we've got Barack Obama. Barack Obama is currently our president, of course, so famous for the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, and also infamous for not getting elected to the all-black pinup calendar of Harvard. So very sad. This is my sad face. Lots of things happened with Mr. Obama and our presidency, which we'll talk about here. So the lesson here is that the thing that we know as Obamacare today has been in the work for 70 years. There's been Republicans, there's been Democrats that have brought together pieces of legislation, cobbled together a lot of thoughts that are now what we all know as Obamacare. All right. This is what it is. Federal subsidies, guaranteed issue, employer mandates, everybody's got to buy. This has been going on for 70 years, okay? From proposal to passage, very long road. I'm going to get a little inside baseball here, so if you political wonks, this will be kind of fun. Fall of 2008, candidate Obama campaigns on health care reform being his major thing. March of 2009, he is now elected. Everybody knows he wants to make health care reform something that he does in his first 100 days. The whole industry is waiting to see how this is going to go. We have an idea, but we're waiting to see. He appoints Kathleen Sebelius, governor of Kansas, or insurance commissioner of Kansas, to head of HHS, Health and Human Services. Immediately, this sets the tone in the insurance business because Kathleen Sebelius has a very long and colored history of clashing with insurance companies. So we know right off the bat in March of 2009, this is not going to be pretty. July of 2009, Speaker Pelosi introduces the House's version of health care reform. August 2009, we have all seen the beginning parts of what Pelosi introduced, and nobody's happy. So remember that summer of 2009, which was recovery summer? That was going to be the recovery summer. Turned out to be guys getting their fingers bit off at town hall conferences summer. You remember that story? There was a town hall conference with a legislator talking about what Obamacare is, and it turns out they get in a fight afterwards with pro-Obamacare supporters, anti-ACA, and people are fighting, and some guy gets his finger bit off. People will give life and limb for this topic, I tell you. November 7, 2009, the House approves with one Republican their version of Obamacare. Okay, the 219 Democrats, one Republican. December 24th, 2009, Ted Kennedy has now passed. There is a vacant senatorial seat in Massachusetts that needs to be filled. There is a Republican named Scott Brown who is making a lot of noise. The politicos have read the tea leaves and see that Scott Brown is likely to get elected. And so they're very scared. Scott Brown is number 41 in the Senate. That's a very important number because 41 is one more vote that keeps the Senate away from a filibuster. Okay, a filibuster, for those of you that are familiar, for those of you who are not, means that you can just talk, and you can talk through a bill and not let it get passed. Okay, so with 41 votes, the Senate would never have passed health care reform, their version of health care reform. So on December 24th, 2009, late in the snowy night of Washington, D.C., the Senate passes their version with their 60 votes, because the number 41 is not there yet, okay, passes their version of Obamacare. January 2010, Scott Brown is installed. He wins. He's there. February 2010, now that Scott Brown's in there, we're starting to think that this is not going to ultimately happen. The House has their version of the bill. The Senate has their version of the bill. At some point, these two bills have to be combined and voted on again. Now that Scott Brown's in place, there's 41 people. There's 41 Republicans in the Senate. A revised version of health care reform is never getting out of both chambers. And so now it's starting to look like it's dying. Health care reform is starting to look like it's dying. Health care reform becomes what? Health insurance reform. Now we got a boogeyman. Everybody hates health insurance. Everybody likes health care. Everybody hates health insurance. So the messaging starts to change, still not getting a lot of traction, and then boom, Anthem Blue Cross of California comes out with a 39% rate increase. Obama goes on Barbara Walters. The tone with a 39% increase comes out. Look at these insurance companies. Look what they're doing to us. The American people, 39% increase. Where does this go from here? We got to get this passed. And ultimately, they pick up the momentum. March 9th, Speaker Pelosi famously says, you have to pass the bill so we know what's in it. That's one of the more infamous lines of healthcare, of politics, is Speaker Pelosi's, you have to pass it so we know what's in it. Of course, March 21st, 2010, the House approves it. 219 Democrats on one side, 212 Republicans on the other. Not one Republican votes for the bill. So not a very partisan issue, as we all know. A couple days later, March 23rd, 2010, the bill passes and is in place. We'll talk a little bit more about some of those things here shortly. So what is Obamacare? There is no real such thing as Obamacare. Okay, there's the Affordable Care Act, there's health care reform, but when people say, hey, Obamacare is killing me, they're talking about an idea, okay? They're not talking about anything specifically. They're generally referring maybe to the exchange, or they're talking about benefits that they lost or a doctor that they lost. But Obamacare is an idea, not any one particular thing. Here you see it at CPAC 2013, Harry Reid standing next to the bill. This is 2 years ago now. That bill is a little over 7 feet tall, a little over 300 pounds. You're looking at Shaquille O'Neal for you basketball fans. That's basically, they had a cardboard cutout at one point of Shaquille O'Neal standing next to the Affordable Care Act, and that's what it is. So lots and lots of pieces of legislation, and there's been thousands more pages produced since then, okay? Major parts of the ACA is, the ACA boiled down to a few dozen words is, everybody's got to have insurance. The government will help you pay for it if you can't afford it. Every insurance company has to cover these certain things. They have to take all comers, no matter what their health may be. And employers of certain sizes must offer coverage, okay? Plus, all of us are involved because there's taxes on all the different levels. There's lots of different taxes applied to us. Lots of reporting from employers as well. So a little more detail on where we came from. March 23rd, 2010, we've got such a beautiful sight here. We've got President Obama using 47 different pens to sign the legislation. Harry Reid is beaming. Nancy Pelosi still wants to know what's in it. She doesn't know what's in it. Biden's over there saying BFD, if you guys remember that very good deal. He said a little BFD. That's an acronym. That's an acronym we won't discuss exactly what it means. And on March 23rd, 2010, immediately we see healthcare reform go into effect. We see grandfathered health plans be something that is popular or born into existence. This is, if you like your health plan, you can keep it, okay? Yeah, a lot of people talked about if you like your health plan, you can keep it. This is a real thing, just so we're clear, that you can keep your health plan if you like it, but nobody told insurance companies you had to keep offering that plan. And so several insurance companies said, we're not going to offer grandfathered plans anymore. We can't operate two totally different mechanical health plans alongside one another. Our systems won't handle it. So grandfathered health plans start. Small business tax credits come into effect. Turns out to be mostly a farce. We've got, in our agency, 500 or so small business clients, and I can count on one hand how many companies got a tax credit, okay? Very, very hard to get that. Dependents can stay in their parents' health plan until 26. Doesn't matter if you're in school or not, doesn't matter if you're married or not, doesn't matter if you even live at home or not, okay? Doesn't matter if you're employed or not, kids can stay on their plans until 26 years old. No more annual maximums. Then there's the little-known tanning tax. I know all of us in this room have been very upset by the tanning tax. An extra 20% surcharge for anybody on all the tanning that we do, sir, right? The tanning tax, I mean, come on. November 2nd, 2010, the bill passes. We have a referendum. People rush to the polls. Republicans have a landslide victory. They take major seats in the House. In the state capitals, 600 plus, almost 700 seats turnover, gubernatorial races turnover, seen as a major referendum on Obamacare. So this means, of course, that the tide is turning and we're going to have some major changes to Obamacare, we think. January 1st, 2011, President Obama is still in place. We've got a new Congress that's introduced with the goal of repealing and replacing, but the beat goes on. Medical loss ratios go into effect, mandating insurance companies to spend a certain amount on claims alone. Funding for healthcare for state exchanges goes out. HSA penalties go up. Over-the-counter drugs are no longer a deductible expense with a lot of our FSAs and HSAs. The beat rolls on. January 1st, 2012, W-2s, employers with larger employers have to report how much they're paying on employees' health insurance on the W-2s. Prescription drug fees go into effect. This is a major part of Obamacare. There's a lot of fees on health insurance companies, prescription drug companies, medical devices. Of course, as we all know as consumers, these things just trickle down to us, okay? So prescription drug fees happen, summary benefits and coverages for the employers. Then we have June 28th, 2012. Big day in my house as I'm up with my coffee early in the morning watching the Supreme Court blog, waiting for the decision of the Supreme Court to validate or invalidate Obamacare. Everybody had a different opinion on what was going to happen. There were 4 issues argued. The key issue was the mandate to offer coverage. Was it constitutional? The Supreme Court obviously, and as we all know, upheld this as being constitutional, which was seen as a major, major blow. Because of course, it's the first time we can all understand or we can all remember where it is now illegal to be inactive. They can compel us as individuals that are lawfully present in America to enter into a private contract with a private company to purchase something. And if we do not do that, we're in trouble. We're fined. We're taxed. We're fined. We're taxed. We're fined. We're taxed. Whatever it may be. Okay? So very, very interesting that they are now legislating in action. All right? Severability, this gets pretty wonky here. Severability is boilerplate legislative language. Basically says, if any part of this legislation dies, the rest of it stands on its own. That's severability. Obamacare was written so quickly and so sloppily that they forgot to put standard boilerplate language that said, if any part of this dies, the rest of it stands on its own. This is where I thought the Republican justices, I know it's not a political court, but of course we all know, I thought that this is where some of the justices that might want to get rid of Obamacare or might not want to take a stand on the mandate as constitutional, might let the mandate stand. I thought the severability clause is where they were going to go. And they were going to say, listen, there's no severability clause in this legislation. You've already eliminated several provisions. The thing's dead. But they upheld it. The Anti-Injunction Act basically says if you have not been hurt, if anybody has not been hurt by this legislation, you can't bring this to the Supreme Court. They didn't ultimately rule at all on the Anti-Injunction Act. But one thing they did do, by a 7-2 margin, they overturned Medicaid expansion. Now, they didn't overturn it because, of course, Medicaid was expanded. What they did was they said, you cannot make states expand Medicaid. Medicaid is the low-income insurance program for all the states. The original version of Obamacare said, if you don't expand Medicaid to the levels that we want for adults and for higher low-income children, you can't have the other funds that we give you to pay for the standard Medicaid that's already in place. This was seen as coercion, and the Supreme Court said, listen, you can't hold that against states. So states were allowed to say, no thanks, I don't want to do Medicaid expansion, and still to this day we have 16, 17 states that have not expanded their Medicaid program, okay? Those are the 4 issues that were argued. November 6, 2012, Barack Obama wins moderately comfortably over Mitt Romney. And this is kind of where we see the repeal and replace people get even more upset, but it's starting to die away now because now Obama's in the White House for another 4 years. Mitt Romney does not win, and so we keep moving on. January 1st, 2013, the Medicare tax, payroll tax goes into place for those working individuals, the higher income working individuals. There's an additional Medicare tax for passive income, so 3.8% tax on investment type of income, so more provisions go into place. Medical device tax, this is one I think we'll see repealed at some point. This is just 2.3% more on knee braces and crutches and stents and all the different medical devices, okay? Just raising the price. January 1st, 2014, most of the major provisions go into effect. So a little over a year ago, is when we saw most of the major provisions go into effect. Individual mandates, so you have to have coverage. The employer mandate was delayed. Subsidies go into effect. The exchanges come out. This is when healthcare.gov and Covered California crashed miserably. They handle, I think healthcare.gov handled 6 people. They enrolled 6 people on the first day that they were up and running. And everybody else was just spinning in circles, okay? So lots of changes happened January 1, and then we're in January 1st, 2015. So full-time help wanted, no, part-time help wanted. Obamacare changes the rules of what full-time is. Full-time used to be kind of a state-by-state thing, and there was some rules on what full-time was, and employers generally got to decide, this is what full-time is, this is when you're eligible for benefits. Obamacare says 30 plus hours a week is full-time. So guess what a lot of employers did? 29 hours a week. They call them the 29ers. Okay, I've got not a fun story. I've got a story about one of my clients who rearranged their whole business model to employ all 29-hour people. You had major chains rearranging their business model so that they had people work no more than 29 hours. Next year, January 1st, 2016, this is when the employer mandate for all companies with 50 or more employees go into effect, okay? January 1st, 2018 is the Cadillac tax. How many people heard about the Cadillac tax? This is the next major issue. Here's your crystal ball. The next big fight is this. The Cadillac tax says if you have a high-value health plan, so if the benefits you get, or the premium and the benefits, so if you have an FSA or an HSA or an HRA, these are all extra payment plans along with your health plan, if the total value equals $10,000 a year for an individual or $22,000 a year for a family, sounds like a lot, but it's not too much, then you pay a 40% excise tax on top, on everything beyond that. So there was a big national article I helped write that was published all over the place on the Cadillac tax. I personally think it'll be repealed. And the reason why I think it'll be repealed is because you have 2 of the strangest bedfellows together on this. You got unions and big business. So a generally Republican entity and generally Democratic constituency both agree that this is no bueno, because guess what? Unions have big-time benefits. Big-time benefits. And so the unions, as soon as they saw this, they're like, dude, we helped you get this thing passed, and now you're going to hit us for 40%. We're going to become immediately less competitive than our non-union counterparts. And so this was supposed to go into effect 2014, and they kicked the can down the road to 2018. I think before we see it fully repealed, you'll see it kicked down to 2022 and 2026, and then eventually we'll all forget about it. It'll never happen. Now, if it does happen, here's the real-world ramifications of this. Employers aren't going to pay 40% more on the premiums. So what will they do? They will take plans and they will make them cheaper so they fit inside the rules, but cheaper plans have what? Deductibles, copays, higher deductibles. The Cadillac tax is supposed to raise close to $100 billion in revenues, okay? 75% of those revenues are not from the tax. They're from all of us paying with deductibles and copays that are much higher that we pay with after-tax money. Okay, so the Cadillac tax drives us all the way from higher value health plans into plans with higher deductibles, higher out-of-pockets, so that we're paying those benefits with after-tax money. And that's important, of course, because guess what? We pay taxes on that money. Okay, so this is driving us to a system where we have higher deductibles and higher out-of-pocket. So the Cadillac tax is not a good thing, and the estimates are that 30-some-odd% in 2018 of Americans will be in a Cadillac tax penalty place, and double that a few years later. So as premiums go up 5 times as fast as the normal rate of inflation, we will all hit this Cadillac tax very quickly. Okay, so Cadillac tax is dangerous. All right, so then we got, of course, the kill the bill, repeal and replace group. So full disclosure, I am a registered Republican. I do not necessarily agree with the Affordable Care Act, okay? But here's the deal. It's not going away. It's not going away at all. The House has been in control of the Republicans for several years. So here's a little quiz, a little interaction here. How many times do you guys think the House of Representatives have voted to repeal or replace some or all of Obamacare? A? 56 times. The House of Representatives have voted to repeal or replace some, part, or all of the Affordable Care Act. Okay? The Senate now is in a place we have Republicans have the majority, and we could potentially get something through the Senate. As long as Barack Obama is in the White House, there will never be a repeal of the Affordable Care Act. There will not be. Because in order to get a veto-proof bill through, you need 2/3 of both houses. Any of you that have watched a TV station or opened a newspaper know that the children inside the Beltway in D.C. are not agreeing 2/3 on anything, okay? So that's not going to happen. So like it or not, and not most of us maybe don't like it, it's here to stay. So what do? If we know that it's here to stay, what do? And the reason why it's here to stay is because we voted 56 times to get rid of it. Even if the Senate passes it, it gets to Obama's desk. He's at that desk till January 20th, 2017. If a Republican gets elected, if they can coalesce around one of the 50 people that are running around the country doing this, then that Republican president is not in a position to propose meaningful legislation till March of 2017. We're 7 years into Obamacare by March of 2017. If we repealed it today, it would cost more to repeal it than it would just to work within it, okay? So I say all of this only because it's important to understand what it is and how do we work within it. So with our clients, we find all the loopholes and find all the ways to thrive in spite of it, not just argue with it. So, truth behind the biggest issues. I got little kids, so I like the little kid slides, so forgive me. Individuals, of course, there's the mandate, there's the penalties, there's subsidies. So we're going to talk a little more specifically on what some of these are. So penalties, in 2014, the penalty was 1% of your income or $95, whichever's greater. That's a lot cheaper than buying insurance. In 2015, it's $325 or 2%. In 2016, it's $695 or 2.5%. The problem that people like me that went to talk to our legislators in Sacramento and D.C. had is you can't do a penalty that's so clearly cheaper to not have it than it is to have it. You'll end up with more people paying the penalty and not having insurance and less healthy people paying whatever it costs to have the insurance. It becomes kind of a death spiral. So we're very concerned about this penalty being so low, okay? And then as far as getting out of the penalty, boy, there is a million different ways you can get out of the penalty. If you don't file taxes, there's no way for them to get the penalty from you. If you owe the penalty, here's what happens. They send you a letter and they say, hey, you owe a penalty. You don't pay it. They send you another letter that says, hey, seriously, you guys owe us a penalty. You don't pay it. Then they send you one that says, this is our serious face. You owe us a penalty right now, and you don't pay it. You don't go to jail. Your credit is not affected. You could ultimately just never really pay. Now, they'll get you once you file a return, and they take the money out of what you are owed back. But theoretically, as one CPA that is that I know said, if you were good enough at your taxes, you could do it so you never got any refund, and you could always keep it so you didn't have to pay the penalty. So very concerned about the penalties and all the different caveats and the ways out. Subsidies. Now, I'm just going to let you guys read this slide. The subsidies are a very helpful thing. The lower income folks get a meaningful subsidy. The 80+% of people that enrolled in individual policies across the country got a subsidy. So this is getting very, very expensive. The average subsidy was about $5,000 a year. 80% of about 9 million people are getting about $5,000 a year, okay, in subsidies. people at or below 250% of the federal poverty level are not only getting subsidies, but they're getting their health plan benefits increased. So instead of a $30 copay, they have a $10 copay. Instead of a $20 generic drug copay, they have a $5 generic drug copay. So on top of subsidies, they're paying less when they go see the doctor, okay? So the subsidies are a very large chunk, and this is what I'm very concerned about fiscally for our future, okay? Employers. Now I know that we're not this is not an employer-centric room, so I'm not going to talk too much about it, but employers are bearing a huge brunt of Obamacare. They're being asked to offer policies to people, to full-time equivalent employees, okay? So basically what that means is you take all your full-time people, and those are full-timers, so they count one full-timer as one person, and then you aggregate all the hours of all the rest of your part-time people, and those are full-time equivalents. So you could theoretically have 1,000 employees, all of which are part-time, but still be mandated to offer coverage because all of the aggregate hours. So this is becoming a very complicated equation for employers, and many of them are wondering, what the heck does this mean, and do I have to offer it, and who do I offer it to? But no, full-time for us is 32 hours, or it's 40 hours. No, it's not. It's 30, okay? This document right here, the 1095C, this is what is keeping employers up at night. If you have 50 or more employees, you must do a unique version of this for every single one of your employees, okay? Part one, number 1 through 6 is an individual employee. So you got the employee's name, date of birth, social security number, all that kind of stuff. And so you can imagine what this means to employers with 500, 600, 700 people. They now have to figure out a way to populate these forms, send one to the employee, one to the IRS, and they've got to put in the Part 2 section, line 15, how much they asked that employee to pay in January for the lowest cost minimum value plan. Okay, what the hell is a minimum value plan? First of all, employers are saying, how do I get these numbers in there? They didn't take the bronze level plan, they took the silver plan, so lots of headaches being created by this document. I'm not going to bore you guys with that too much. Employer mandate. So the employers also have a penalty. There's 2 different penalties. If you offer coverage, but it's not sufficient, it's not affordable, it's not minimum value, it doesn't have all the benefits you need it to have, you're going to pay $3,000 per person that goes to the exchange and gets a subsidy. If you say, you know what, screw you guys, I'm not offering benefits at all, you're going to pay $2,000 per employee. Okay? Now, early on, John Deere and Verizon, companies like that said, wait a minute, we're paying $6,000 and $7,000 a year for employees. You want us to pay $2,000? Perfect, we'll do that. And then some rules for the big boys changed, of course. So small business, small mid-sized business are the ones that really had to take the brunt of the employer mandate penalty. Now, affordability. This is where there's some nuances within the law that actually really benefit employers and really stick it to the lower income employees. So remember, I'm an employer. I've got 500 employees. I have to offer something, okay? I have employers that are in this situation. 500 employees, all low-skilled, low-income, $9 and $10 an hour people, a group of employees who don't want benefits. They don't want that. The employer can't afford to compete with his competitors and offer benefits at $300 or $400. So how do we go about doing this? How do we comply? Well, Obamacare says affordable is defined as asking the employee to pay no more than 9.5% of their W-2 income. Kind of an innocuous number. What does that even mean? Well, if you got a $10 an hour person working 30 hours a month or a week, you can ask that person to pay $164 a month for a really crappy plan, okay? So imagine a $10 an hour person being asked to pay $164.66 a month for a $5,000 deductible HMO plan that doesn't give you any benefits before $5,000. That is affordable, that is minimum value, and it meets all the 10 minimum essential coverages. That is compliant for an employer. So now the employee is saying, well, this is not, I can't afford that. Yes, you can. Obamacare says you can. It's affordable, 9%. It covers all the things it's supposed to cover. So it's affordable, it's minimum value. Employees are saying, well, this is really terrible. the rest of my family at least can go to the exchange and get some subsidies. No, you can't. No, you can't. The Obamacare says if you have an employer-sponsored plan that is affordable, $164, has minimum value coverage, and has minimum essential coverage, the 10 minimum essential benefits which we talk about, you and your family are ineligible for any subsidies. So this is where we got a major problem with the lower income working class in our country, where these employers are saying, hey, listen, it's affordable. They said it's affordable, and employees are saying, this is crazy, I can't afford anything, okay? So we've got lots and lots of employers that are doing just this, and it's not their fault. They're trying to stay in business. These people need a paycheck, okay? So individuals and employers, so there's some rating methodology changes, HIT tax, health insurance tax, and some other items. So modified community rating, all right. So modified community rating says you can't charge the oldest person in the age bracket, so up to 64 years old, you can't charge them any more than 3 times what you charge the 20-year-old person, okay? Generally, the split has been about 5 to 1. Obamacare says it can't be any more than 3 to 1. So what happens? It doesn't do this. The rates don't come down to the middle here where older people pay a little bit less and younger people pay a little bit more. What happens is younger people pay a lot more, older people pay a little bit less, and you have a situation where some of the youngest people that we need to be paying in premium, the 25-year-old, the 30-year-old people getting 50 and 60% increases because of these rating methodology changes, whereas some of our older employees getting 5 and 6% decreases, okay? So the rating methodology has been very harmful to the younger population that we really need insured. Our 10 minimum essential benefits, most of these are things that we already had. There's some interesting ones like pediatric dental and vision. So all Obamacare compliant plans must offer dental and vision to kids on the medical plan. So that's a very interesting additional benefit. Not a terrible one. There's a lot of kids that need that help. So the 10 minimum essential benefits weren't a huge problem. This is another slide that looked better on my computer, but the impact of the health insurance tax, this is where the insurance companies are being asked to pay billions of dollars every single year to Obamacare to help kind of on the plus side of the revenue column. So when they're balancing out Obamacare, what it all costs, they needed to find revenue, so they just decided, we'll just tax the insurance companies. They won't pass it along to the consumers. Well, yes, they do. In California, the health insurance tax for privately insured people through a business or through an individual policy is going to cost you another $2,000 a year, okay? Here you're going to see the differences between Medicare rates and what out-of-network charges are. So there's major differences. If you've ever gone out of network and seen huge, crazy bills, there's major discrepancies between in-network and out-of-network charges. And then we got Medicare. We just celebrated our 50-year anniversary of Medicare, a program that when it was started by LBJ had a $3 billion price tag. This year it's got a $608 billion price tag, okay? When we started this, stamps were 5 cents, Vietnam was raging on, the Beatles were in the top 10, and now we are in a very different world, okay? There's Part A, B, C, and D. D is the newest part, that's prescription drugs. Part A, of course, is your hospital benefits. Part B is the outpatient stuff. Part C is Medicare Advantage. It's kind of a private HMO type of policy. By the numbers, we've got 10,000 people turning 65 every day. 47 million people eligible in 2010, double that when we get to 2040. The payers versus beneficiaries. So when Medicare first started, it was a payroll tax that helped fund it. Back in 65 and in the 60s and 70s, there was basically 4 working people to every 1 Medicare beneficiary. Now there's about 2 to 1. This is why Medicare for All doesn't really work, because we can't have a 1-to-1 ratio with the type of benefits Medicare promises. We need more people paying into it with payroll taxes than we have using it. But with the population growing in this segment so fast, with the average age that people live to close to 80 when it was closer to 70 when this started, this is why Medicare is in big trouble financially right now. So right now, about 2% of our senior population is without health insurance. Back in 1965, it was about 50%. So it's been successful in insuring our senior population. Back in 1970, we spent about $385 a year. Now it's over $12,000 a year we're spending on each beneficiary, okay? Medicare spending about 14% of the total federal budget. And then we've got the Obamacare cuts. So there's been tons of arguments about, did Obamacare cut Medicare? Will Obamacare hurt Medicare? And the answer is, as it's written, yeah, there's $716 billion being removed from Medicare. You can't take $716 billion of funding out of a particular program and expect it to work as it was working, okay? The hospital services, here you see where a lot of those numbers come from, where a lot of those funds are coming from. The Affordable Care Act, the proponents of the Affordable Care Act, like Barack Obama, will say that they didn't take 716 out. They pulled it from here, they paid it to here. It was a bunch of different numbers, and ultimately they're spending more on Medicare than they were prior to Obamacare. And this is just not true, okay? They are pulling $768 billion out of it and spending 52 into it. So Part D gets 48 billion new dollars. We're going to close that donut hole, that pesky donut hole, okay? Sounds like a great idea, but it is an expense. So why have we, all of us that are on Medicare, us, if I can join you on Medicare briefly here, why have we not really felt it? If it's so bad and it's 716 billion, nearly $1 trillion being pulled out of Medicare, why does everything feel kind of the same? Should we just be quiet? Should we not say anything? Should we just pretend nothing's happening? Well, the other shoe hasn't dropped quite yet, okay? So this is from 2010. The Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, the chief actuary, says that it's going to be difficult for providers to remain profitable because a lot of the removal of money from the Medicare system is reduction in payments to providers. That's where all this money comes from, okay? Your benefits are generally going to stay the same, but providers are going to be reimbursed a lot less for their services. And when providers get reimbursed less, what do? They don't take it anymore, okay? So we'll have potentially, if all these cuts stay in place, we could have a major supply and demand problem for our Medicare folks, okay? They're saying 15% of hospital providers, Part A providers, could be out of the Medicare market within 10 years, okay? And that's from 2010, all right? So that's the other shoe that we're waiting on to drop. So the coverage gap, the donut hole. So Part D says for the first part of your prescription drug plan, you have all your standard copays. Then after you spend a few $1,000s in copays, you're totally left bare and you're going to pay all the cost. And on the other side of that, the catastrophic type of benefits, we're going to cover basically 95% of the cost. So the donut hole was becoming very problematic for a lot of seniors because it was very expensive. If you kind of landed right in that donut hole but didn't get to the other side, you spent a lot of money. But how many people were we seeing in that situation? We've got 39% of our seniors on group health plans, and so they don't have Part D. We've got another 30% that are lower income seniors that don't have to deal with the subsidy of the donut hole. And then we've got 31% that are on Part D that don't get any subsidies that potentially would have a donut hole problem. Of the 31%, 25% don't even reach the donut hole. 1% get all the way through the catastrophic, and 5% reach the donut hole. So $48 billion, the biggest contribution back into Medicare from the Obamacare cuts is a problem that only 6% of seniors generally face. So the Independent Payment Advisory Board, the IPAB, remember Sarah Palin being ridiculed for the death panels, the evil death panels? They exist. Now, do they exist in the form that our politicos said they did? Is it going to be a panel where you have to go plead for your life? Not exactly. The Independent Payment Advisory Board is a board of 15 people, unelected. They're appointed by the president, who are charged with keeping Medicare prices in line. So that's a tough sell. How do you keep it in line? Now they are specifically told they can't ration care, but when they are trying to find better efficiencies within Obamacare or within Medicare system, where do they turn? The projected savings is $24 billion. So where are they getting that money? If they can't ration care, if they can't limit benefits, where are they getting that from? So I'm concerned about the IPAB. The death panels do exist, but not nearly in the ugly form that some people with an agenda will have you believe. The doc fix. So there was a long-standing Medicare reimbursement rate for doctors that was never really put into place. If it had been put into place, it would have reduced doctors' compensation and reimbursements by close to 30%. And they kept kicking it down the road. Just like I think they're going to do with the Cadillac tax, Congress kept pushing this doc fix down the road. Next year we'll do it, next year we'll do it, next year we'll do it. They finally did it. They called it MACRA. So SGR, the sustainable growth rate. This was Medicare reimbursement levels that said, every year we won't let the reimbursement rates go up too much. We won't let Medicare spending grow too terribly much, maybe 1%. And then as in medical inflation was going up 5 and 6 and 7%, they said, well, we can't cut rates by 5% this year. We'll do it next year. And then it did another 4 or 5%. We'll do it next year. And then another 4 or 5%. So for all those years, they didn't do anything about it. April 16, 2015, they did their doc fix. And with the doc fix, they have basically, in the future, they have capped reimbursement rates to 1% or 0.5% on top of regular inflation. Okay, so this is potentially scary. If medical inflation keeps doing what it's doing, we could have a problem here. So, but the doc fix is in, so we're no longer got this doctor reimbursement thing hanging over our heads, but we have the other $700 billion in cuts hanging over our heads. So, there's all the bad stuff. What's gone right and what's got wrong specifically? So, one of the good things is the dependents being covered up to 26. I think that's a good thing. It's kind of silly having kids that have moved out of home, they're 25 years old, married, and got a kid on the way that can stay on mom and dad's health plan, but this is generally a pretty low-risk population, so okay, fine. They can stay insured. If we have more people insured, that's a good thing. The 3 Rs, so there is a program that is with individual and small group policies that, for lack of a better term, basically says insurance companies that price their plans incorrectly and lose a ton of money they get money from the insurance plans that price their plans competitively and had good risk and they made good money. So the insurance companies are all writing checks to one another. The ones that got bad risk get checks from the ones that get good risk. And so the 3 Rs, reinsurance, risk adjusters, and risk corridors, it's a funky deal. It feels pretty un-American. When you did well, you have to pay the guy who didn't do very well. But it kind of helps stabilize the market a little bit. So I'm kind of a fan, right now. The minimum essential coverage is not bad. Free preventative care. So we gave away free preventative care. So if you needed to get mammograms or get regular checkups and you're under 65, you got that for free with your health plan. Of course, nothing's free, as we all know. Guaranteed health insurance plans. So the biggest problem we had pre-Obamacare was the fact that we just had people that were ready to pay for insurance that nobody would let them have insurance. And so this fixed that problem. It's going to cost us some money, but I think ultimately it's a good thing that we have a way for everybody to get insured. And so I think that's a good thing. And then entrepreneurs. There has been no shortage of the American entrepreneurial spirit. There are lots of different things that are going right around healthcare reform. We can talk about that later. What's gone wrong? The pre-existing condition insurance plan. So this is one of the first big things that happened. Obamacare said, listen, in 2014, we're going to make it guaranteed issue for everybody. But in June of 2010, just a couple of months after we passed this, we've got this pre-existing condition insurance plan. So if you can't get insurance anywhere else, we're going to open up this federally funded high-risk pool, and you can get insurance, and we're going to keep the rates nice and low for you. And we've got all this funding to support it. They ran out of money so fast, predictably. They shut it down within a year, and nobody else was allowed to enroll in it. And so it was supposed to bridge the gap between 2010 and 2014, didn't even make it a year, okay, because they very predictably ran out of money. Doctor networks. We are seeing a major constriction in the commercial market and individual market in providers. So the Obamacare says you can only charge this much. You have to cover this stuff. The third leg of the tripod is doctor networks. So insurance companies are shrinking networks down to Medicaid-sized levels right now. They are reducing who you can see to very, very, very narrow networks, to the point where there are parts of the state of California where you don't have a neurologist, or you don't have the right specialist to go see. So, of course, California is going to fix that and make it bigger and more expensive. But doctor networks are becoming a big problem. The budget, this thing was originally passed. Obama wanted it to be under $1 trillion. We got in there, look at that, imagine that, $987 billion was the price tag from the Congressional Budget Office at the time of passage. We are way past $2.5 trillion right now. There has been a lot of things repealed that was on the revenue side that is no longer there, and subsidies have cost more. Medicaid has cost a lot more, the Medicaid expansion. So forget that $1 trillion number. We're pushing towards $3 trillion over a 10-year period, okay? And growing. Remember, Medicare was $3 billion when it first started. Now it's 600 plus. It's gonna be $1 trillion in a few years. And then there's these issues. So Covered California, you guys all heard of Covered California? This is the Obamacare exchange in California. These guys have, it's been a chocolate-covered mess with Covered California with the website. They are the bright, shining gold standard by which all insurance exchanges in the country are judged. We were the first ones to say we'll do it. We have done it the best. We've enrolled the most people in California of any other exchange in all the states, and it's still a mess. There still is major, major, major problems with just the administration of Covered California. We've got a $100 million shortfall with Covered California this next year. So where's that money coming from? Every policy that they sell with Covered California has a $14 per member per month charge to fund Covered California. And that's not nearly enough. They're $100 million short. They're pushing that up near $20 per person. So this is just layered on expenses for the bureaucracy. Medicaid expansion is costing way more than we thought. Subsidies. Here's the next story you're going to hear about. Subsidies are based on the second cheapest plan in the market. So your income, how much the second cheapest individual plan in the market costs. There was a very low-cost provider that just is in a race to the bottom, undercut everybody else, and now the second cheapest is a very cheap policy from HealthNet with a very, very, very limited network. And now everybody's subsidies based on that very, very cheap policy, which means everybody's subsidies are going to go down while the prices are going up. So wait till you see some of these in early part next year. You're going to see people for the same plan pay more in the benefit, pay more in the premium and get less in the subsidies. And then ACOs, accountable care organizations. This was the brainchild of Obamacare, saying we're going to pay providers one lump sum to do a particular surgery, deliver a particular service. And it's a great idea, but the administrative hassles around it have been so cumbersome that hundreds of ACOs around the country have just given up. They're not going to do it anymore. So what's the future of healthcare look like for us? By 2024, 1 in every $5 spent in the U.S. will be on healthcare. Okay, so it's obviously a very, very big deal. Right now it's a little bit less than that. So we're going to see more and more tinkering with payment models. We're going to see primary care likely removed from the for-profit model. So right now, primary care is in a crisis. We're going to need 52,000 more doctors every single year to get into medicine, into primary care, to service the needs of our growing senior population, to service the needs of all the younger people. All the smart kids are going into law. JM is in law. He didn't go, he's a perfect candidate to be a doctor at one point, but there's no money in the primary care stuff. The ones that do go into medicine are going into specialties, not going into primary care. And it's because there's no money in primary care. There's no money in keeping people healthy. The fee-for-service model says if you get paid for MRIs, you get paid for surgeries, you get paid for keeping people the more expensive type of things, okay? So primary care is in a major, major crisis. You're going to see more of PPO, HMO hybrid type of experiments where we can maintain and manage the care but have more selective networks. That'll cost a little bit more, of course. Concierge, who's heard of concierge medicine? You guys heard of concierge medicine? I think I'm very passionate about concierge and different delivery models like this. Concierge medicine is where you pay kind of a membership fee. It doesn't take the place of your insurance policy, but you pay for access. And that's what it is. You're paying for a front-of-the-line pass. And I think as the crisis of primary care providers continues to grow, as the supply of care, the supply of providers dwindles and the demand for it increases with the expansion of Medicaid, you're going to see more and more people with the desire to skip the line. So concierge is going to be a big thing. Telemedicine over the phone, using technology like Skype to visit with a doctor. You don't see this as much because they don't have a way to bill for it. That's why you don't see as much email and phone and email and Skype communication, because they don't have a way to bill for it. And then minute clinics. I'm a personal believer in minute clinics because my daughters, I got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they get sick, and I don't want to wait 2 days to get them antibiotics. So the minute clinics inside CVS are a big, big thing. I'm really happy with them. Medical homes for chronic disease management. There are 5 chronic diseases that drive over 80% of the healthcare costs in America. We are going to see more provider groups address these type of things like diabetes, like chronic COPD, like dementia, a lot of the cancer type of issues. You're going to see medical homes where they are closely monitoring you because it's a lot cheaper for them to monitor you and keep you healthy than it is for them to let it become a big problem. And then, of course, more technology. We'll see more and more technology. I was with a Qualcomm executive that they have the technology where, like a non-smoking patch you can wear on your arm, you can wear something like that has Bluetooth wiring in it. Who knows what kind of thing that causes later on in life, but they can actually monitor you wirelessly and call you and tell you, you need to get to the emergency room, you're about to have a heart attack. They have technology that can do really, really cool things. Will our system allow them to unveil that type of technology? We'll see. I think they will be forced to. Insurance company mergers, hospital mergers. This is a growing problem. Insurance companies are getting bigger. They're getting collectively. We've got 3 insurance companies in this country that have a huge majority of our population, okay? And we've got hospital and provider consolidations. They're getting together. So insurance companies say, we have all these members, we're going to pay you less for that service. And then now hospitals are consolidating, saying, you can't sell in our market without scripts, or up in the Bay Area with some of those providers, Tenet, with some of them. So these consolidations, every time you hear an insurance company consolidating or a hospital consolidating, it's bad news for consumers, okay? They'll play it like it's not, but it's not very good for us. And then doctor shortages, of course, on Time Magazine, they had a big expose on doctor shortages, which we've talked about. More risk-sharing ideas like the 3 Rs. I think we'll see higher penalties for individuals and businesses. They'll keep driving up penalties up to drive the behavior they're looking for. And then the Medicare changes, the other shoe that we're thinking is going to drop, will be coming. So what can you do? What we can all do is keep bugging our elected officials. They need to know that we're not happy with some of these provisions. Some of them are very good for us. Some of them are not as good for us. If you have relationships with these people, they will listen, okay? They will take the message back to Capitol Hill. They'll take it back up to Sacramento, and they will hopefully listen. If we get loud enough about what we want, they will hopefully change some of these things for the better, okay? So do not quit, do not stop what you're doing, okay? Now on the last word, focus on the agreement. So there is so much about healthcare reform that actually is good. There's so much about the policy of healthcare reform that is good that we can all agree on. So as you're talking to friends at dinner parties that don't have the same political views as you, there is a lot that we can agree on with that. So let's make those type of things stronger. Let's coalesce around the things that are good about some of the healthcare reform things. We all agree that something needs to be done. We all agree. We differ on the fringes about exactly how it's supposed to look, but we all agree something needs to be done. Read the footnotes. So in insurance, there's a very famous thing, the big print giveth, the fine print taketh away. All right? These insurance companies, these documents that they pass out, they are marketing documents. They are made to get you to buy. It's the small print that tells you the fun stuff, okay? So read the small print. Align yourself with pros, okay? So who is your professional? Who is your, you guys are all here because you're with a top-notch professional in the estate planning market. Who's your professional when it comes to dealing with your healthcare issues, whether that's with Medicare, Part D, group health plans, individual plans? Get with people that know what they're doing. Keep in touch with your legislator like we just talked about, and be prepared for change. The one thing we can promise is that this thing is going to continue to change. Be prepared for it. Don't be caught off guard by it. Rates are going to continue to go up for a little while. Hopefully, they stabilize at some point. And the one thing we can all do that is within our control, the legislative stuff is not in our control. The politics, as nasty as they are not necessarily in our control. But one thing is in our control is taking care of ourselves. Walking, eating better, exercising, not smoking, drinking, whatever it is that your vices may be. Taking better care of ourselves is something that we can all do because that lessens our need for medical services, which lessens our interactions with a system that has many, many faults, okay? So those are the things I'd say to take care of yourself. And with that, I think that's, as Bugs Bunny would say, that's all, folks. So thank you guys very much.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the condensed version. That was amazing.
Thank you.
That is incredible. Wasn't that good?
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you.
Wow. Now, the good news is, as you know, this is being recorded. So all of you who missed something, there may have been just something you missed, or you want to watch again, you may want to put a pad of paper and sit down and go through all that stuff. That was incredible. Thank you for being with us. This is a small token of our appreciation for you being with us.
Thank you.
And I always warn you, if these folks have questions, they usually come up and ask.
Please do.
So we hope you don't have any plans for tomorrow morning. Skip your breakfast or what have you. Again, let's thank Bill for being with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Just a quick reminder, the evaluation sheet, the survey, if you will turn that in as you leave, that would be wonderful. If you haven't had a chance to complete it, just mail it in when you have a chance to fill it out. Thank you, good night, and be careful when you drive home so you don't need any of this health care.